Thank you very much, Sam, and thank you for inviting us along today. So, yeah, I'm Jonathan Beebe. I'm a learning disability nurse, and I set up a social care company called PBS4. We support people with a learning disability who are described as having complex needs. So the people we support often need round-the-clock support, and without our support, they would either be in a hospital place or in the criminal justice system. So we do all we can to help people avoid that and to live independent lives in the community. We're a relatively small organisation. We support 36 people. With the complexity of needs, we need quite a few staff to do that support. So we've got over 200 staff. And we operate in Hampshire, Dorset, Berkshire and Oxfordshire. So we're very much in the South Central region. And yeah, we've been going for about 8 years. Ian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hello, my name's Ian and I have autism and I have a learning disability. I've been with PBS for about three months now. 3 years. 3 years. And I like being with PBS4. I like being with them because that's a safe place for me to go along to talk about how my experiences are.
Brilliant. Thank you. And it's very different doing presentations like this. We're not picking up on your body language or anything like that. So please do feel free to interrupt us and ask questions. Raise your hand if you want to do it that way, or type things in the chat. So warmly welcome any questions and interruptions as much as possible. I think I often get paranoid when I'm presenting that I sound boring, and then the more I think I sound boring, I think the more boring I get, and I just go duller and duller and duller. So the more I'm interrupted, the better. It will make the presentation more interesting.
And me as well. If you want to ask me any questions, you can as well. Thanks.
Brilliant. So I am going to try and share my presentation. So Sam, can you nod if you can see that? Yeah, all good. Right. So, sorry, someone's unmuted.
We cannot pretend it's not happening. The first step to recovery is
Jenny, you need to mute your microphone. Thanks, Jenny. So I thought I'd start by talking about what is a learning disability. And because I think it can be a term that isn't very easily understood. So when we're talking about a learning disability, we're talking about people with severely impaired intellectual functioning. Classically, that would be recorded as an IQ score of 70 or below, which would be the second centile of normal distribution. So we're talking about people whose intellectual functioning is in the bottom 2% of the normal distribution, and that would having an IQ that low would cause you severe difficulties in understanding the world, in problem solving, in relationships for you as well. Yeah. It also includes having significant limitations in what we call adaptive behaviour skills, and this is basically activities of daily life.
Challenges, different people's challenges.
Yeah, so it might be that people
might be aggressive, or they might take it. They probably have long time to process.
It's more like some people have difficulty in washing themselves and keeping themselves clean.
Self-care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people might have problems cooking their own food, or
sorry, I shouldn't interrupt.
No, you can.
You see what you're saying about that?
Yeah.
Sometimes when I have help with something,
yeah,
it's usually if I ask someone to read something to me, and I've got a disability, I've got a learning disability, and I've also got autism.
Yeah.
But sometimes with a learning disability, people don't mix in very well with other people, and isolate themselves away and stuff like that.
There could be social
And that's
difficulties.
what I do a lot of time.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, so quite often people will have social difficulties as well. But yeah, so the adaptive behaviour skills is basically difficulty with daily living skills. That means that people can't survive without support. That's where the significant limitations bit comes in. And the onset before the age of 18. So myself, I had an acquired brain injury when I was 19 years old, which is what led me down this route. Technically, I wouldn't be classed as having a learning disability if I had a brain injury at 19, because I'd have had 18 years life experience without that learning disability.
Right.
And those years...
That's not right. They should have diagnosed you.
Well, those years as well are formative years. So they're years when you're developing and learning and growing. So if it happens before the age of 18, it's considered a learning disability. If it happens afterwards, it's...
Yeah, I'm a 39-year-old man now, and I've still got a learning disability.
Yeah, because yours started before you were 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. Historically, terms were used that we now find offensive. So going back to the end of the 19th century, people with learning disabilities would have been called subnormal. Then around the 50s, it would have been mental retardation. And then up till about the late 80s, it would have been referred to as mental handicap. So I guess we could say that learning disability services have been woke for some time, really. You know, we've been looking at how we use right words to describe people in the most respectful way. And I think that's changed as times have changed, and words that were historically medical terminology have been used offensively.
See, I like to be called a client. That's what I like. Okay. But I don't, PVS4 don't call people actually clients, because...
What do we call people?
You call me not a service user, because that's what they used in my last places. Yeah. Adult or whatever.
We call you an adult, yeah.
I don't know, mate.
No, we call you Ian.
Ian, yeah, they call me Ian, yeah.
Yeah. So if we have to try and use a word to collectively describe people, we try and use people we support. But yeah, where possible, we just use Ian. But yeah, I suppose it's the point there is that times change, I think, and we have to keep up with what people want to be referred to. Basically, is very important. There's been some discussion in the learning disability community about, do people like the term learning disability? Some prefer learning difficulty, but a learning difficulty is typically used to describe people with needs like dyslexia and ADHD, and they don't have the same level of significant needs.
I've got a bit of that.
Yeah, as people with learning disability do. So in some ways it's hard. We don't want to medicalise people, we don't want to label people, but we need a way of describing what people's needs are, so as services can be commissioned for
and
them.
That's what a lot of people in the community doesn't understand about what people's learning abilities are, because I can tell you a bit about myself as well. I've got a learning ability, and I have autism, and I have like low functioning disorder as well, where like if someone's giving me information and I can't actually memorize it, that means it classifies I'm actually struggling with the information what's going through. And I was in school once, and basically I was kicked out of school because of my learning disability.
Yeah.
And so
no, that's good. Do you want to say anything else?
Yeah, and like all the schools where I went to school, they didn't treat me right. And like, I think what they should do really is to get everyone educated about a learning disability, because they can't. I've got people who I know who has a learning disability, and basically what happens to them, they have low moods, they have a lot of problems at school, and then no one's actually sitting there listening to them.
I think it'd be fair to say that Ian is one of the more independent people that we support. I'm
not really independent, no, because I've still got support.
Yeah, but
so that doesn't classify as me independent.
You've met some of the other people we support as well, haven't you? And So it's not a competition, but you're more independent than others in some ways.
And I don't understand what's there.
Because you can express what you want and you need verbally. You can have a job. You do your DJing job, don't you?
Yeah, I'll tell them at the end about that.
Yeah, and so yeah, we support all people with all sorts of different levels of needs. But yeah, I would just say you're probably one of the most independent people we support. Really.
Yeah, independence, one word to say to me. Okay. Independence. You don't say independence, you just say very sociable, not actually independence, because that confuses me.
Okay, no problem. A learning disability isn't treatable. There's no cure for having a learning disability. It's not going to away. It's not going to go away. It's not a mental illness. It's not something you can catch. It's not time limited in any way. There's no treatment for it, and it's not a learning difficulty. So it often gets confused with learning difficulty. So I suppose the difference between ADHD, dyslexia, and needs learning difficulties like that would be that they're specific learning needs. If I had dyslexia, I would have trouble with reading and writing. I could find adaptations to overcome those. A learning disability is global. It affects a person for their whole life. It's not just in one specific area.
But there also like other people in the community still has a learning disability, but people don't notice they've had a learning disability. They don't actually say that they. And then this is what I want to say in this presentation. Yeah. A lot of the outcomes of different people's disability. I'm autistic, yeah, and I go out and say to people I'm autistic, but I've been diagnosed that when I was a little boy. And what happened is a lot of people go out there, they're too scared to actually say what their disability is like, because no one actually gives a monkeys about what other people's disabilities are. And that's what happens with me, because when I try to explain to people, it takes me a long time to say what I'm saying. And I was bullied at school as well with my learning disability, because the bullies used to grab me and hit me and punch me. And they were very, very abusive towards me, and the teachers didn't even do anything about it.
It is a type of neurodiversity, so the term neurodiversity is being used more and more now, we're finding, and it's typically used to describe people with learning disabilities or autistic people. So it's used in those communities. It also includes ADHD, dyslexia, mental illness, acquired brain injury, anything that means that someone might think differently. So neurodiversity in general is just an acknowledgement that all of our brains aren't wired the same. We experience the world in different ways. So we need to embrace that, and we need to learn how other people might see the world in a neurodiverse way. I'm hopefully not going to bore you with a history lesson here, but it'd be useful to give a bit of background as to where people with learning disabilities have come from, what the background is. So if we were to go back to the 18th century, people with learning disabilities were often looked after by their families. Some were in monasteries or convents, and some would be living on the streets. So yeah, poverty was a big issue, and yeah, there wouldn't be any of the statutory services now. 1601, Elizabethan poorlaws gave responsibility to local parishes to house people with learning disabilities in a poorhouse. So we start to see a compassionate and caring society. In the 18th century, Industrial Revolution began, and the first types of institutional care started in the form of workhouses. And then in the 19th century, we started to see increased movement in the eugenics movement. Now, the eugenics movement is largely associated with Nazi Germany and eradicating Jewish community. It's been used in all communities in history throughout. There was a big thinking that if we let these feeble-minded people breed, then we're going to have a feeble-minded community. So they would often institutionalize people with a learning disability. Obviously, that wasn't the term they would be using back then, in the hope of saving society from being exposed to the ills that they would bring. But I mean, there was a movement of institutionalizing, and then there were epilepsy colonies, for example, where people went if they had epilepsy. There were colonies for single mums. So it was the done thing at the time, but it would be something it would be appalled by now. So the social policy solution, the solution for eugenics really, was purpose-built asylums for people with learning disabilities, which started around 1855.
Jonathan, does the police, have a learning disability officer?
Ahmed is on the call. They tend to have disability officers that help consider disability issues.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that, because I thought they were they don't take people with a learning disability.
No, they've got specific disability officers that help to make sure that their services are accessible.
Oh,
yeah. So then if we come to the 20th century, statutory legislation introduced which said that people with learning disabilities could be forced to live in an asylum. There were quite negative attitudes towards people with learning disabilities in the past. It says about being forbidden to get married. It was actually illegal for people with learning disabilities to have sex with other people with learning disabilities until the Sexual Offences Act came into place in 2007.
So basically like what happened when there.
So yeah, so we're not talking about long time ago history here. We're talking about 15 years ago. It would have been illegal even for you to have sex with a person with learning disabilities.
Yeah, I know that, but as I'm
I
saying,
thought I was being shocking.
no, I was just saying, like, what happened at home with me wasn't my fault.
Okay. Is that a private thing or is it something you want to share?
Going back to what you're saying about that.
Right.
I'll leave it then.
Okay, it's up to you. So yeah, there's been obviously policies about sterilisation as well to prevent reproduction of people with learning disabilities. Action T4's Nazi Germany's euthanasia program killed over 200,000 people with a learning disability. In 1940s, the first Camp Hill community was established. Now, there's mixed views about Camp Hill communities. So these are pieces of land where they are set up to be independent communities, specifically for people with learning disabilities. Some people would say that why are we excluding people with learning disabilities? Why are we creating these special villages for them? Other people really love them and thrive in them because it's a place where they feel safe and they don't have to cope with the negativity that they get from the general society's views. It doesn't help build a tolerant community, I don't think.
It needs to be educated a bit more better. I think it should be advertised that a little better because people with learning disabilities, they could have any sort of ability. They could have like bipolar and well, I don't know. There's like different disabilities, and people got people in wheelchairs, you've got people who can't talk, you got people who can't verbal. And that's what the government should be advertising out a lot more to let people know who they are.
So there's mixed views about the Camp Hill communities. Some people like them, other people think that it's not really 21st century care. 1948, the NHS took control of the institutions, then called hospitals. And then in the beginnings of the 1950s, it was thought to be 55,000 people with a learning disability living in hospital in England and Wales. Now, if you fast forward from 1950 to 1988, it goes from 55,000 to 30,000. So you can start to see how there's a policy change. And then you get to today, there's about 2,500 people with learning disability in hospital. So compared to where we were, we've come a long way, and there are very few people with learning disabilities now in hospital settings. However, there are still 2,500 people, and many would argue that's still too much. The big challenge with the hospitals is people being in there for too long and seeing hospitals as a home. And it's how do we get people discharged? Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah, you were in a hospital, weren't you? Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, it's good. I've asked you to. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. So, some policy changes that have had.
Some of this is hard for me to read.
Okay, hopefully I can read it and you can understand it from me saying it.
Yeah.
If you want me to explain it, let me know. All right. So 1950s, we started to have reports that conditions in hospitals were poor and patients weren't allowed to leave.
Right.
Similarly, in the 50s and 60s, and we found that people in hospitals could actually be living in the community. Oh, sorry, I've skipped. I told it to go back and it hasn't. There we go. So we've had in 1958 the Brooklands experiment. Jack Tizard found that children develop better in small houses rather than in big hospitals. We had the work of Wolf-Wolfensberger, which was called normalization, which was saying how do we treat people with learning disability with the same respect as everybody else.
And that's what people should understand about people being respectful towards each other. Not if someone's got a disability, they can't. You don't go behind their back and discriminate them because of their conditions.
Yeah, I'm going to skip through the rest of the things that are on here. Really, you can see that policies change. Community Care Act has been a big influence, and there's been a big movement about how do we get people out of hospitals. The last bullet point on there is about back in 2011. There was a BBC documentary called Winterbourne View, which was about a specialist hospital in Bristol. We expect when people are in hospital that they'll be cared for. The Panorama programme showed people were being physically assaulted and mentally abused as well in this institution. And that caused a lot of public outcry. And it's led to a lot of policy change in learning disability in recent times. It's still very much on people's agenda now. The sad thing is there was commitments from all of the government bodies after that documentary that Winterbourne View would never happen again. Yeah.
But you never know. Well, they could say that, and then they could be telling you lies as well, because any hospitals now have to be have CQC there, making sure the cares are all better for them. Well,
in 2018, just 7 years later, there was another Panorama programme about a hospital called Wharton Hall Hospital. And
I've not heard of that.
They showed that abuse was happening there as well. So despite
how did they cope with that then?
Well,
did they have problems with that?
The public were outraged and were saying to the government, you promised this would never happen again, and it's still happening. So you
don't believe what they say then?
No.
Nor do I. Don't believe it.
No, and
looks like that's the funeral where I used to live.
Oh, okay.
I used to live in that one there.
Right.
That's in Northampton. I know that because that's the hospital I stayed in.
Brilliant.
It's St Andrew's Hospital. That's what it's called.
Yeah. So there are still large inpatient hospitals for people with learning disability, and this one being St Andrews. So St Andrews is 10 buildings. More than 50 wards and 659 beds, generally locked wards with high levels of restriction. We're not saying that people with learning disability won't have times of distress when they don't need to be admitted to places like that, but there needs to be better regulation, and people need to be able to be discharged quickly from those places.
Why did they not, going back to what you're saying about that, right? Why did they not discharge me for about a year after when I got admitted there? They give you a certain time to be in hospitals, but when someone's been admitted to hospital, they should say, all right, Ian might have to be in hospital for 2 years, and then after that they can discharge me. But I can go back from my experience is being in hospitals. I think when I went to St Andrew's Hospital and other places, I actually was treated in the wrong way, and they kept me in hospitals till 13 years, and basically they weren't treating me what they're supposed to have treated me.
Yeah. And the reason for talking about the history and where people with learning disabilities have come from as far as policy goes and support goes, and where we are now, is to really reflect that I think historically people with learning disabilities have been kept behind closed doors, treated as lower class citizens, not given the same worth as other people.
Really hope this.
Yeah, and things have greatly improved now, but they're still not good enough, and there is still an attitude out there that you are not as important as me, you don't have the same worth as me. And if that's coming through in the policy context, and the lack of response to seeing the abusive things that can happen in these hospital settings, then it just makes it okay for kids at school to be talking abusively about people with learning disabilities as well. Someone somewhere needs to show value for people with learning disabilities, and that we hold them in high regard. Yeah. And it's not present in policy, in action, in how we provide support for people with learning disabilities, and it needs to change.
I want to do some work with learning disabilities. I like to do some work on that, so I understand what everyone's needs are. I like to do that as a volunteer or something, just go along to some of the events and see what learning disability people like, and get more experience doing it, because my learning disability is different to other people's, because my learning disability, what I've got, I have high function personality disorder, and and I have personality disorder. So my problems, what happens with me, is different to other people's, because my learning disability, I can do things myself, but I do need support as well. But I want to do some work with learning disability people to learn how to see what they feel like.
Because you're unique and your experiences are unique, aren't they?
Yeah. I won't talk anymore. Right?
No, do. You're looking for signs, aren't you? You're looking for signs that I'm telling you to stop, and I'm not giving them a purpose.
No, I'm just saying I don't want to talk. I won't talk much now.
Do people want to hear you in? Right. So hate crime. There's not a lot of research out there about hate crime in learning disabilities. There was a really good report done by Dimensions back in 2019.
I've heard of them.
They ran a project called I'm With Sam, and they surveyed groups of people with learning disability, and they found that 73% of respondents to them reported experiencing hate crime. We think it's probably higher than that, don't we?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's probably a bit more, about 2,000 hate crimes been mentioned this long time.
Well, as a percentage.
So that date there might be wrong, because from that time there, it's not the right times, because and when I watch TV up in my room, a lot of it's all about hate crime, and there's a lot more cases what's happening through there, because no one's actually listening to what people feel like. No,
I'd be really surprised if it wasn't 100% of people with learning disability had experienced a hate crime. I think that for some people, they will be accepting it as just, this is normal, this is how people talk to me, this is how people treat me. Other people may not realise that hate crimes are happening, or they might be too scared to say that they've experienced.
I've got something to say to the group when I finish.
Okay.
Like yesterday, I went to Tottenham, and I went to ring the place, and the lady was so rude. She told me to don't want to. I'm not allowed to swear.
Yeah.
So
F off.
F off.
Yeah.
And they said they don't want a DJ and don't even come back to my pub. That's sort of like way they speak to me. And that could be a hate crime, because that is actually being abusive to someone who's offering their services.
Yeah. So I put in some experiences of hate crime here. Obviously, these aren't unique to people with learning disabilities, but these are some of the things that we come across. So fraud.
People asking you for money.
Yeah, well, I was supporting a man once who had some teenage girls that befriended him. So this really links to mate crimes at the bottom as well. So they befriended him and told him he was their friend, and then got him to call the bank and were encouraging him to transfer his money through the bank to their accounts. So he was very lonely and appreciated the company of these girls. He thought they genuinely were his friends, and they were conning him out of his money. Fortunately, the bank picked up on it. They could hear him in the background, and the teenage girls didn't realise that when you're on hold, it's still recording, and they picked up on lots of the conversations they were having with him when they weren't on the phone. So it didn't happen. We worked with the police to get some cameras fitted in his house to keep him safe. But yeah, the fraud is very common, and a lot of people with learning disabilities are easily convinced into doing things. So I worked with another man who got in with a bad crowd. They went around stealing cars. They'd all run when the police turned up, and he'd be left sat in the car taking all the blame. Violence is not uncommon. People being treated violently and hit at or thrown at, and
Yeah, that's the experience I've had.
Yeah. Acts of intimidation.
Yeah, sometimes I feel some people intimidate me, but because of my learning ability, I don't know if they're being joking or if they're serious or not.
Yeah. We were supporting a man that lived next to the Oasis Academy in Lords Hill.
I know that.
Yeah. And he liked to be in his back garden. He got severe autism. He would rock backwards and forwards in his garden and make lots of
Is he in a wheelchair?
Unusual noises. No. But he would be making strange noises if you didn't know him, and lots of rocking movements. The school children would see him over the fence and would start shouting abuse at him. And then they started throwing things over his fence at him and smashing his windows.
That's disgusting, isn't it?
Yeah. We managed to get some pictures of them from his bedroom window, and we shared them with the police and with the school. And we went to the school and we said, look, the police being involved is one thing, but we want to help and do more. So we agreed to give some lectures as part of their citizenships program about what learning disability is, to help raise awareness and about why.
Can I do something like that?
Yeah.
Do you reckon I could do that?
Yeah. So yeah, I think the children were being intimidating and abusive, and
but that's uncalled for what they're doing to the poor person who has autism.
Yeah,
because he can't stand up. The person might not be able to stand up for himself, and bullying him like that is not funny.
No. So that covers verbal abuse as well. Cuckooing can happen to some people with learning disabilities, where a stranger befriends them to move into their house
and then kick you out.
And then kick them out. Yeah. And also we've seen increasing reporting about county lines and people with learning disabilities getting involved in drug trafficking. There's lots of online abuse for people with learning disabilities. Have you experienced any online abuse?
Yes, I have. I've had people ring me up saying nasty things about me.
Yeah.
Saying
Facebook and Twitter or anything?
Facebook, Twitter and Instagram sometimes a bit rude to me as well.
Yeah. Sexual abuse.
I can't talk about that. That's personal.
Okay, but yeah, obviously, people with learning disabilities are more vulnerable to being coerced into sexual actions that they don't consent to. May not be able to consent to sexual activity that happens against them.
I can't discuss that. Yeah, that's personal to me.
Absolutely, that's fine. Yeah, or being convinced that a sexual relationship is a romantic one when it's not. So lots of things like that can happen to people. And
that's when people should be educated about relationships. They shouldn't just go straight into a relationship with that person if you don't know what they are, how friendly they are, how much, like they can also ask you for money and stuff and say, oh, I'll lend you 10 quid and I'll pay you back. And if you're given the 10 quid and they don't pay you back, means they've got your money.
Yeah. We've already mentioned about mate crimes, but I mean, I think with the policy direction, how things have changed, as we explained before, there's been a real drive towards building inclusive communities, which is great and much needed. But there's been a move away from specialist places for people with learning disabilities. A lot of the day services have closed, for example, that used to support people with learning disabilities. And I think whilst it's moving against segregation perhaps, and about including people in everyday activities, we're missing the right for people to congregate, and people aren't meeting people with similar life experiences to themselves to build true friendships that are meaningful, which I think then we have a lot of people with learning disabilities experiencing loneliness. And then, when you get someone come to you and show interest in you as a friend, you'll do anything because you believe that they're your friend.
Why does people discriminate people with like autism and learning disability? Why do they do that? Because when you're in venues up to socialise with, we ain't got much time.
No, it's fine. It's just my watch pinging.
So like, I want to make new friends, but there's nowhere where we can meet up to make friends and stuff. So I do feel like the whole community should, like, once a month get an event for people with autism and also put them in a safe place, because when you're in like venues to do like parties, birthdays, sometimes they go, oh yeah, we don't need a DJ, or we don't need that, whatever. And this is what happens with me. When I make inquiries for things, they go, oh yeah, we put you on the list of what you need to do. And when you ask them about social things, they go, oh, this is not a sociable club or something, because they need to work around people with autism and a disability. And I don't think that's it. I know you said that it's all changed, some of it's all changed, but a lot of it's not changed because people are still feeling like they're not socialising with anyone. Yeah.
So loneliness is getting worse, isn't it? I think whilst we fully support inclusive communities and communities that are accepting and see that as a positive way forward, there's still a right to congregate with people who are similar to you, with similar life experiences, so you can make friendships.
Yeah.
So this one is about what makes people with learning disabilities vulnerable to hate crime. So some people with learning disabilities look different. Some learning disabilities are obvious visually. So like Down syndrome, for example, there are physical features that accompany Down syndrome that instantly make someone look different. Other people might just seem a little bit strange or unusual.
I've been called weird before as well.
Yeah.
Weird. They say, are you weird? And I go, no, I'm not.
Yeah. And that's because often with a learning disability, there's social difficulties. So it might be difficulties with personal space, difficulties with social rules that I have trouble coping with, and I haven't got a learning disability. So people might come across as acting a little bit different, and that might make them stand out. I think there's public fear because it's unknown, and if you see someone who's acting a bit strange or looking a bit strange, people can be scared if they're not used to seeing that, which is, I guess, where inclusion comes in, and having inclusive communities helps people to be used to seeing people with learning disabilities and not being frightened.
But I think the government should be publishing that a bit more better. I think they should advertise that a lot more better, because a lot of people have learning disabilities. People look at me and think, oh, Ian might not have a learning disability, but how can they tell if that person's got a learning disability if they don't actually read whatever happens?
Some people hold a belief that people like Ian should be in hospital.
Yeah, and that's what they do.
So we do often get neighbours complaining to us saying, why are you putting people next door to me? They don't belong here, they belong in a hospital. Do you want to talk about your experience with your neighbour at the minute?
Yeah, basically, I've got two neighbours living next to me, and they're complaining about my music being so loud at certain times, and I think that's a hate crime because they are just targeting me for no reason, and this person complains about other people playing their music, and they're actually targeting me.
So you think their complaints aren't valid complaints, are they? They're
No,
complaints to court.
we've had them knocking on the door saying, can you please turn your music down? If you're not, going to get the council to come and kick us out.
Yeah. People with a learning disability, because they've got a disability in learning, will have a limited understanding and be more vulnerable to being exploited because of not understanding what's happening to them. Many people with learning disability have limited speech. We support quite a few people who don't use words to communicate. They communicate in different ways. So trying to express what's happened to them can be difficult, which again makes
and that's what they need to do with me as well, because I can talk, but I have like stuttering in my when I talk, and people go, yeah, get your words out, but they can't with me. I can't actually get my words out quick because it so part of me can speak a little bit, but not certain words I can't, because it's very difficult. But people, not saying people from PBS4, but when I was in school, I was targeted about my speech, saying why do you stutter? Why do you talk to yourself? And I took that, and that's what Jonathan was saying about hate crime. People bully people with different disabilities. They can't just say, right, oh, you got a disability, we can help you with this, because they can't do that. And I think that, I'm not being rude about you lot, but I'm saying that should be advertised a bit better. Or we do posters and send it into people's places and ask them about it. See if we can advertise it.
So if you've got a person who's unable to tell other people what's happened to them, limited understanding what's wrong with them, it's an easy target for some people, unfortunately. Limited social networks and isolation. So limited other avenues to get that positive interactions with other people from. And then going back to what I was saying earlier, really, society's value of people with learning disabilities is poor. We've systemically created a society where people with learning disabilities are treated as the lowest of the low. If they're perceived as subhuman or of no worth, how are we to expect things to be any different? And from Ian's point of view, if the worst name that a kid can think of calling someone else in the playground is, I know, a retard or something like that, then what that says is you're instantly thinking that the worst thing you can call him is what I am labelled with as well, which means you must think I am the lowest of the low as well. So we need to challenge how society treats people with learning disabilities in general.
I think there should be special centres for people who have a learning disability, instead of saying, yeah, go to this club. And a lot of people fake their age groups as well. That's what I'm saying as well. People look like they're over 18, but with people with a learning disability or autism or anything like that, how would you know if that person's old enough if they look younger and 18, right? That can fool people, right? So what I'm going to say here is that this will be published into a lot of schools, a lot of places where people have access to the government, and put it all on there as well, because I don't think there's a lot of communication going on with the government about that sort of thing.
No. And the last point on here is people with learning disabilities might not be believed when they're reporting incidents or seen as a reliable witness. So they might have problems with their memory, for example. So if something happened to Ian and he had to give you an account of what happened, like to describe a timeline, he might struggle to process things like that. He might be recalling what they look like, and he might change some of the facts about what he thinks they look like, because his memory doesn't work in the same way as ours does. So he might be seen as giving inconsistent evidence that is then difficult to take action on, because it's difficult to be credible with a learning disability sometimes. Ian, did you want to share anything about your thoughts about hate crime or your experiences that we've not shared already?
Not really, no.
You covered everything you wanted to cover?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're coming close to the end now. We are a bit early.
Doesn't
I
matter.
thought Ian was going to talk for ages about his experiences, and we've
Nah.
already covered most of it.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it, basically? We can increase awareness of the vulnerability of people with learning disability hate crimes. We can increase social networks. I think having lots of social support around people with learning disability first makes them less likely to be accepting of abusive and harmful relationships, and less vulnerable to people offering to abuse them through forming those mate crimes or similar. We need to not accept it as okay. So I can't remember who said it now, but one of my favourite phrases ever is the standard we walk past is the standard we accept. If we see people treating people with learning disability as anything less than an equal citizen and we don't challenge it, we're accepting it as okay, and we are then perpetuating it to carry on happening.
So going back to what you're saying about that,
yeah.
You know, if you go to pubs and people are like rowdy and going, oh yeah, you shouldn't, like they could discriminate you, but a learning disability could maybe caused by where they react. Like if you go to like a pub and they say, oh, autistic people shouldn't really be going into pubs,
Yeah.
that's actually discriminate them, because people don't actually it's like going to shops. I had a lot of issues going into shops saying, oh, autistic people can't go into shops. And if you go into the shop, I'm going to get police to remove you. And I think that should be raised as a concern, because a lot of people with autistic don't actually go into the shops because they're too scared about being kicked out of there, or they're not being listened to by the people there.
There's definitely discrimination. If that
happens. I had experience with someone in the shop told me to get out of their shop and said, right, I don't want you back in the shop. If you do come back, I'm going to get police to remove you.
Yeah. We need to make reporting hate crime accessible. So most people with learning disabilities will struggle to complete a form. They may be afraid to talk to the police about what's happened. They may have had negative experiences with the police themselves.
I've had that.
And they may not understand what a hate crime is themselves and realise that a crime has been committed against themselves. There is some great materials out there. There are accessible hate crime reporting forms that can be completed. The reason we've joined the third-party hate crime reporting centres network is to make sure that there's expertise in the field and to support people with learning disabilities to take part in the great scheme.
I think we should get more like more people for PPS4 to do like talks once a month about their experience of hate crime and stuff.
She's got it. Sorry. There should be.
But really, that's what I've been asking to do with PBS4. But I feel that PBS4 is. I'm not saying PBS4 doesn't do anything wrong. I think they should really get services like clients involved in different trainings and stuff, because because if you meet someone who you don't really know and they go, oh, Ian's got a learning disability, but what triggers Ian off, or what actually to do with like relationships with people. And really, I think after this presentation, I'll talk to Jonathan after, and we need to set up like meetings like once a month to talk about people's experiences about hate crime and also learning disability, because people don't understand what it means.
Definitely. And I think as well, there's lots of easy read information out there as well.
But I have pictures when I have to do things, because I can't read at all. I've got a learning disability, but I can't read.
So there's an organisation called Books Beyond Words, and they've got books with just pictures, so they can help talk through issues with people with learning disabilities. And they've got some of those that are about what a hate crime is for people with learning disabilities as well. So we need to be talking to people with learning disabilities about hate crime and saying this is unacceptable and what should be done. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. We've just got a short video that I want to play for you. I'd like to play it in full if I can, and I think we've got time for that.
Yeah,
This
we don't-
is.
we don't have to be at an appointment till 4. So
Oh, okay, you got plenty of time then. It's by a band called Heavy Load, and
I've heard of them.
oh, good. They're
Is that with the Gear Buddies? Heavy
it is
Load.
with the Gig Buddies.
Yeah, I actually knew that person because he did a gig when I was down there
Excellent. So
with Mike Harris.
brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I know him. Yeah.
So it's a punk band made up of people with learning disabilities, and this is their version of the Ting Ting song, That's Not My Name. In the learning disability community, this is known as the hate crime anthem. So I'm going to play it for you now. Hopefully it works, and hopefully you enjoy it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I think that's a typical punk reaction to something that really is wrong in the world, is stick two fingers up at it and do a Mooney. That is the end of our presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen there. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm just checking the chat. Oh, so yeah, if anyone has any questions, we've got some time if you wanted to have a chat.
Any questions for Jonathan about today's session? Anything you didn't understand or want a bit more information on? Yeah, happy to. Yeah, Jonathan or Ian will be happy to answer those.
I don't know, really.
Or any comments about today?
Just a comment from me. I really enjoyed Ian, I really enjoyed your perspectives on everything as well, because so often you get told things about groups of people without their actual voice. That was really important. So thank you for that. I really liked the pace of it as well. It felt very, very calm for something that's a really important and quite an emotive issue. But I think everything was dealt with really, really well and very thoroughly. So yeah, just thank you both.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you,
Really
man.
appreciate it. Ahmed?
Yeah, again, I just wanted to say very, 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 very much thank you to both of you, Jonathan and Ian, for what is a very insightful presentation. I know I've learned something new today, and I would like to hope, Ian and Jonathan, that sometime in the near future, we can have a chat about perhaps what we can do as partners to help my service, my organization, to be better informed when they are dealing with individuals with learning disability, because I'm sure many of my colleagues would very much appreciate that. So that's something I would really like to progress together.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'd welcome that. There's a lot of activity going on at the minute in the NHS. There's some mandatory training going into all health and social care providers. It's called the Oliver Mcgowan mandatory training, after a young man called Oliver Mcgowan that died in hospital because his needs weren't understood. But yeah, we'd really love the opportunity to speak to you about how we can help the police as well. That would be great. Thank you. I think that's it, Sam. Thank you for all your kind comments in the chat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, there's no more comments then. Yeah, if you've got any after today's session that you you think about after today, then yeah, I'll put Jonathan's email in the chat, so I'm sure he'll be happy to answer those, or if you've got any thought for Ian or Jonathan, that's great. Sorry, Ahmed, do you still have a comment? I know you've still got your hand raised. I don't know if you got
No, it's a legacy one, but,
okay.
I will say one more thing to you, Sam. Thanks again for organizing what is another very, very welcoming session on hate crime across all the strands. Thank you.
It's okay.
Very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well,
Thank you, all of you.
yeah, I'm going to just before we finish today, just quickly kind of go through the information about how you can contact our network if you've got any sort of wider queries, and about another upcoming session we've got. But yeah, but as I'm sure everyone will agree, that I think that was a really useful session. I certainly learned some things that I didn't know, and I think, yeah, it was great to hear your perspective as well, Ian. So yeah, thanks to both of you for agreeing to do this session. And yeah, I think it was useful to everyone here. And as I said at the start, we'll be sending the presentation that Jonathan and Ian gave to you all, so you have that for future reference. But yeah, so I'll just share my screen and go through the PowerPoint that I've got, just a couple couple of slides. Just bear with me. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. Okay, so basically just, I mean, apologies. Let's just go back to that. So yeah, just got some information here about our network. So I'll just give you kind of an overview of what our network is about. So yeah, essentially we're a kind of network that's community led and for the community to ultimately support victims of hate crime. That's anybody who's been affected by hate crime. So yeah, talking about disabled people, people of different races, religions, people of different sexual orientations, and people of transgender identity. So we support all of those groups and help victims to come forward and also raise awareness of the issues what we're doing today. So that's essentially what our aims are, and we've been going for it's about 2017, and we're steadily kind of growing and trying to be more diverse and represent more communities. So ultimately, those communities groups can join our network and support more victims. So that's what we're constantly trying to do. And yeah, so if you've got any questions about our network or kind of hate crime in general, or if you know of anyone who's would like to ask us some questions, then yeah, you can you can give them our contact details that we've got here. So yeah, just put my email, you can sort of contact me, and if you do have any queries on sam.waddington@spectrumcil.co.uk, or you can give me a phone call on 075 11 618 232. And then we've got the address and links to website and Facebook, which you can use when I send this round to give you some more information. I will say, while I'm here today, that we are actually at the moment, as we're expanding at the moment, and in order to keep up with the work that we want to do, we're going to be recruiting a administrator for our hate crime network. Currently doing that now, and applications for that close at the end of the month. So if you've got an interest in that, or know of anyone that would have an interest in that, then they can by all means get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to give some more information on that. But yeah, also feel free to contact me. I can give you information on our network members should you wish to contact them, or provide resources that can help to raise awareness too. So yeah, anything to ask, then I'm happy to help with that. So the next slide, yeah, this is our next session that we've agreed to run with another of our members, Solent Minds, who support people with mental health issues. They'll be doing a session on targeting of people with mental health issues. That will be on Wednesday, 11th of May, 2:30 to 4, and that will be the Zoom link to use there. But this will again be an event, as most of you will have signed up for this through an Eventbrite link. So that will again be distributed, circulated to everyone, including everyone in this meeting and beyond. So get some people registering for that one too. So yeah, look out for that. And then later on, we'll also inform you about other ones that we're currently arranging for later in 2022 on different types of hate crime and similar issues. So we look forward to welcoming you to those if you're able to attend. So yeah, hopefully that gives you a little introduction to our network and how you can contact us. So as I said, I'll distribute that and Jonathan's Ian's presentation following the meeting.